Hi, everyone. Welcome to Kindred Skulls. I'm Matt Freese, and I'm here with my fourth episode in the series breaking down the Vikings draft picks. This one's going to be on, obviously, their fourth draft pick, Kobe King. You can check out the Donovan Jackson, Ty Felton, and Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins episodes that have been out the past couple weeks on wherever you're listening to this, right? So go check those out if you haven't already. But Kobe King, obviously a linebacker out of Penn State. The Vikings took him in the 6th round, 201 overall. They had traded back and picked up 2 picks, right? They took Gavin Bartholomew with the next pick. But if you watch any of the post-draft content that the Vikings put out, like their inside the draft video, you can tell that they're extremely excited to get Kobe King on the roster. They mentioned his name with Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins at the Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins pick. So 80 pick or like 70 plus picks later, they were still able to get Kobe King. So I'm sure they were really pleased with themselves about that decision to trade back and still get kind of a guy they really wanted to add to the defense. And, you know, if you turn on the tape with King, I think you can see why in terms of his big play ability that kind of explodes off the tape in the run game, right? He's really aggressive coming forward, makes some big hits on running backs in the run game, and I think really has a good understanding. So I guess I'll dive right into it and start with the run game first. Then I'm going to talk about him as a pass rusher a little bit, which obviously, you know, he was a blitzer primarily, right? He's a true off-ball linebacker, so he's not someone who has the flexibility to be like an edge rusher, but he still rushes the passer occasionally, and then I'll talk about him in pass coverage. But if we go back to the run defense, I mean, he's explosive coming forward off the snap. He can get inside opposing offensive linemen. There was a good play, I think it was against Illinois, where it's a read option play, right? So the quarterback has the option to hand the ball off to the running back who's supposed to run up the middle in zone read, right? It's a traditional zone read play. He's reading the defensive end on the play who stays, right? So the defensive end has his eyes on the quarterback. He stays, the quarterback hands the ball off, but Kobe King got inside the right tackle so quickly that the running back could no longer run zone up the middle, or he was going to get tackled for a loss by Kobe King. So he did bounce the play outside right into the defensive end, right? And that's the explosive potential that you see. I mean, there was a huge hit against West Virginia that he hit out on running back. That was a really impressive play. And I think there is a mental side to his run defense that he does a pretty good job of as well. So like when you're a running back, what you're trying to do is manipulate the linebackers at the second level. You're trying to manipulate Kobe King to make him think you're going to one gap and then bounce to the other gap. And hopefully that linebacker is committed to that other gap and he's not able to get to you and you have an open hole through that gap, right? As a linebacker, you're trying to read the intentions. That's called pressing the hole from the running back side of things, right? You want to press the hole and then bounce to another hole where you hopefully have open space because you manipulated your opponent into giving you that open space. Kobe King does not let players press the hole because he's quick enough to, you know, when coming forward, get around the play and make the tackle in the hole. There was a really good play. I think it was against Illinois. Illinois and Maryland, kind of, obviously one's orange and one's red, but they're similar enough colors and they were both wearing white uniforms that as I go back through my reps, scrolling through them, it's kind of hard to tell the difference without having them separated out into the right folder, just based on the camera angle. But I think it was against Illinois where the running back does this, right? He tries to take a step towards the hole and he then bounces it towards the outside, maybe outside the right tackle or in between the right tackle and the right guard, right? Something like that. And Kobe King, again, gets up to him, makes the tackle in the hole. Like, it was absolutely nothing. So I think he does a really good job as he's coming forward, diagnosing those sorts of plays. There was was it a sweep play or it was a screen play or something against Maryland again, where I think it might've been a sweep where he is, you know, you're in shotgun. The running back is lined up to the right of the quarterback and he's running all the way to the left. Kobe King is like, he's shot at, maybe it was a screen. to that same player. It's like he's shot out of a cannon to make the play in the backfield, right, as he chases that down. He's rugged and able to take on opposing blocks. He's only 6 feet tall, but he's about 240. So that's a really compact frame with good leverage. He stonewalls opposing offensive linemen. He really does not let them get by him kind of at all. As a run defender, he's able to shed, he's able to get in the plays on tackles. So really positive stuff from an in the box perspective from Kobe King. Like he's very quick with his first step. He's very explosive, trying to get into the backfield. He's rugged to hold up to blockers, and he's got good anticipation and the ability to move side to side on where he wants. I think coming forward, he's really good at moving side to side. So there was a rep against Donovan Jackson, even in the game where Penn State played Ohio State, where he's lined up on the line of scrimmage kind of as an edge rusher. And obviously that was Donovan Jackson's first game at left tackle, right? So on the run play, he initially takes a step outside and then darts back inside, crosses Donovan Jackson's face. And if you listen to my Donovan Jackson episode, I talked about how impressed I was with Donovan Jackson's recovery ability as an offensive lineman, right? So he's beating Donovan Jackson at something Donovan Jackson, I think, is really good at and showed consistent ability throughout his tape to do. So that really impressed me to see just his, I guess, lateral quickness coming forward. The thing I will say is that I'm a little bit up and down on Kobe King's ability to get to the edge. So in between the tackles, in the box, I think he's a phenomenal run defender. When it comes to runs that are wide, I saw some inconsistency there in how I thought he was able to get out wide. There were a couple of really nice reps. I think there was one against Maryland where he wove through like 3 or 4 defenders. Maybe it was against Illinois. Where he wove through 3 or 4 defenders, hit the running back on the sideline. No, actually, I'm sorry. This was in the Ohio State game, right? So it's against like Travion Henderson, where he's weaving through 3 or 4 defenders, gets to the sideline, makes a great read on the play, does not get touched at all by the opposing blockers. Like that was some Ivan Pace level stuff, right? Ivan Pace was phenomenal at running the sideline. It seemed like he was, almost phasing through people with how he was able to work through the trash to the sideline and get around the linemen, get around all the potential blockers and defenders, and get to the ball carrier. This type of play from Kobe King seemed like that to me. There were a couple others where he did a really good job taking a good angle and tracking the ball carrier to the sideline, but there were also a couple plays on tape where I thought he was a step slow. There was a play against Illinois where he ended up making a shoestring tackle, but I felt like against a more explosive back, that player gets by you. Against West Virginia, a teammate ended up making a tackle that I thought Kobe King probably should have been in on, and he was a step late to, right? So there are a couple circumstances where it's maybe a little circumstantial, and maybe I'm overrating it a bit, but I'm not sure he is quite the athlete when it comes to moving linearly. And it's kind of a difficult thing for me to parse, right? Because I talked about his ability to move across gaps in the box, right? Where if the running back fakes going to one hole, he's able to follow him to the secondary hole that the running back was actually planning to cut in through. I talked about him crossing Donovan Jackson's face in the run game, right? So like there's some really positive stuff there from King in those circumstances. But I think that when I see him truly have to take a first step laterally, it takes him more to accelerate going to his side than he's able to just flare his hips and actually like start running laterally immediately, right? It takes a step for him to build up until he can get himself fully turned, and then he starts accelerating towards the sideline is what I think I see. And there are a couple examples that really showed out to me as plays where I thought King should have made the play, but he was kind of a step late too. There was a quarterback draw against West Virginia where, the center's coming up to block King and King has to cross his face and he's not able to do it. and the quarterback gets like 15 or 20 yards on the play, right? And I don't know, what the West Virginia quarterback's time speed is. I'm just always kind of assuming that a quarterback is going to be a little bit slower than a running back or that sort of thing, right? And, that was a true lateral movement for King. He had to start running sideways from facing the line of scrimmage, and he wasn't able to transition all that quickly. There was a play against the Ohio State where it's a little bit of a different thing. King is responsible for his gap, but he sees a wide lane for Quinshon Judkins, and he tries to turn and get back into the play, and Quinshon Judkins gets well by him in that scenario. And there was another scenario where instead of like the rep against Donovan Jackson, where he's stepping forward and then he can plant his foot and kind of jump to his left, right? Or when he's moving forward and he can kind of move laterally from already having momentum, it's different from when his momentum has to stop and he has to turn around. And I don't think he accelerates as quickly in those circumstances. So that showed up as a potential issue to me with him. Obviously, it's harder to do that, right? But I thought it was notable that I saw multiple reps where he was getting run by in circumstances where I would have hoped a linebacker would be able to make the tackle in that sort of area. And King didn't show up as a great athletic tester, right? At his size and weight, it's okay. And he ended up with a green arrow RAS, but that RAS more came from his individual drills all being average to slightly above average than it came from him being a true standout at any form of athleticism. So like his 4.67 40-yard dash, that's fine for a linebacker at the NFL level. Like I don't want to be alarmist about a 4.67 40 because I think, obsessing over speed at those kind of positions is a little bit of a downside that we've run into from the popularization of the combine. Like a 4.6 is totally fine for a linebacker at the NFL level, but it's not elite. And I think that shows up in certain circumstances. Similarly, his 7.193 cone and his 4.32 short shuttle, like those are fine numbers for a linebacker, but I think his limitations show up in those kind of difficult moments where he needs to do something that's athletically very difficult. His best athletic test by far was his 10-yard split, right? He ran a 1.57. I think that absolutely shows up. I talked about his ability to flash into the backfield, that play where he forced the run to the outside. There are a number of plays where he's able to hit a wide open hole and hit the running back in the backfield, right? Where I don't necessarily grade those all that highly because there's a blown blocking assignment if a linebacker is running free into the backfield, but it's notable that he consistently has those explosive plays on tape. So I think he has the explosion to be able to do that on a consistent level. As we keep going in run defense here, the last thing is shedding blocks, right? I talked about him stacking and shedding blocks pretty well. And I think he does it pretty well, but there are some really weird instances where he doesn't do a good job of it. There was a play against Maryland where it was a screen pass to the outside and he has to work to the outside and it basically functions as a run. So I count this as kind of a run defense thing rather than a pass defense thing, right? Because he's not covering a guy. He's trying to get off a block and make a tackle. And the tight end comes out and just absolutely throws him to the ground because he's trying to run laterally and he doesn't have the toolbox to get off the lineman in that scenario. There was another scenario against West Virginia where there's a center climbing to the second level. And again, he has to kind of move laterally through the gap and the center is able to completely turn him out of the play. Now, there were a number of examples of him once again coming forward against tight ends against UCLA where he's able to cross face, completely disengage for the block and get into the play. So I don't know if it's a consistent hand fighting issue for him as it is I think he's a pretty skilled hand fighter, but it might be an issue with either his awareness of when the block is coming, his preparedness for the block in those scenarios, or his lack of a little bit of flexibility, right? When he's moving laterally to be able to take those things on and multitask two things at once. So to me, it kind of comes back to that flexibility, I'll say concern that I have. But in general, you can absolutely put this guy on the field and ask him to defend the run. There may be slight limitations on runs to the outside. That's what you have corners for. And the Vikings want their corners to be pretty active in run defense to force those runs back inside, right? So the linebacker doesn't have to chase something down all the way to the sideline. And it makes sense for the Vikings because Ivan Pace is a really good run defender. I mean, King kind of feels in the same mold of a player is Ivan Pace, where he's bigger than Pace, but he's still a little bit undersized, right? Under 6'1", in the 230s, but really violent and physical going forward. So you kind of see the comparison there and see, oh, this guy looks like Ivan Pace. And I think there's some positives to draw from that. If I flip it over to pass rush, which I'll just kind of go really quickly on, he did have some pretty decent pass rush production in 2026. I think the production numbers kind of belie what he was actually doing as a pass rusher because he ended up with 3 sacks and 16 pressures. In the games I watched, I didn't really see him generate his own pressure on the plays, unfortunately. They were all circumstances where he was left basically unblocked as a blitzer. And like one of his sacks, I think against Illinois was he was in coverage, right, and executing a coverage responsibility, and the quarterback rolled out and he ended up coming forward on the coverage responsibility and making the sack. That's great to see at that level. At the NFL level, usually quarterbacks are more aware than that to me, right? On a quarterback rollout, if you're abandoning your coverage responsibility, usually they're going to get the ball out in some capacity. Maybe sometimes they don't, and you can get sacks in that scenario, but I really think that probably that's not one where he would have gotten a sack at the NFL level. His other sack in the games that I saw was against Ohio State, and that was one where he ended up being a delayed blitzer and was completely unblocked up the middle. Will Howard got the throw off, or it looked like he got the throw off, but I think his knee was down on the play and they counted it as a sack, right? So he comes forward completely unblocked. You saw other pressures where, again, it's a similar thing. The pass protection scheme just doesn't pick him up and he ends up getting a pressure on the play. So it showcases that explosive ability I talked about going forward against the run, but I didn't see much in the way of pass rush moves for him. And on a couple blitzes that I did saw where he was blocked, he wasn't really able to get off those blocks. So maybe this is a me problem, right? But in my head with Kobe King and kind of the way I saw him talked about before watching him was like, oh, this guy, can be like Ivan Pace. Ivan Pace, to me, was a demonic pass rusher at the college level. Like, opposing offensive linemen could not get their hands on him and could not block him, period, as a pass rusher. And I don't see that from Kobe King as a rusher. Now, he plays a maybe not completely different, but he plays a different role than what Pace was asked to do in college at Cincinnati. Like, Pace was very often pass rushing. He did play coverage rest, but a lot of time he was kind of a spy, right? Or just a short hook dropper, which is all Kobe King really does in coverage. But, he was not a primary coverage player as a linebacker, where King plays a lot more coverage than what Ivan Pace did, right? Ivan Pace was rushing all the time, so he probably had more time to develop pass rush technique and something like that. And I'm not saying that's something that Kobe King can't learn. It's just not a skill set that he has right now, right? So that's another, I guess, in the negative column, I would say that King is underdeveloped as a pass rusher as it currently stands. And then we get to pass coverage. I have pretty significant concerns from Kobe King in pass coverage. I think athletically, he's fine. There was a play against Maryland where it was up against Ty Felton, and he was on the line of scrimmage, right, threatening a blitz, and he's able to drop back into his deeper. It's still like a hook zone responsibility, but it was a little bit deeper underneath Ty Felton and kind of take away a throwing window. That's against a 4.37 wide receiver, right? I was pretty negative in my breakdown of Ty Felton, but if anything, he's really fast and explosive off the line of scrimmage, right? So he was able to explode backwards and kind of get underneath that play. But I don't know if he's got the top end speed or the ability to run backwards. And do difficult assignments, like really difficult assignments. Like that was a difficult assignment, but I don't think it was like a something I would not expect every linebacker to execute. Running the pole in Tampa 2 is something that I don't expect every NFL level linebacker to execute, but it would be a really nice thing to have, right? And there was a rep against, and you know, you're working off of really limited examples of some of these things because he's not asked to be in Tampa 2 all the time. It's kind of a specific situational coverage, right? And even if you're in Tampa 2, you're not always going to have to run the pole because the opposing offense doesn't run a seam route, right? So against UCLA, there was a seam route of a wide receiver running up the seam, and King is definitely a step behind him and kind of gets stacked by the vertical route, right? So he did an okay job of getting depth, but I think a quality quarterback would have been able to throw the ball over his head and maybe potentially get a big chunk play in that scenario because he just wasn't quite fast enough to keep up with the receiver, right? So I think there are some athletic limitations that might prevent him from becoming an elite coverage player in the pass game. That still doesn't necessarily stop him from being a totally acceptable coverage player, right? Like you can still play underneath zones really well, even if you have some athletic limitations like down the field. But unfortunately right now, like there are some examples of Kobe King, you know, being able to follow the quarterback's eyes to the ball. And there was one against, I think it was UCLA again. Yeah, it was against UCLA where King drops back into his hook zone and sees the quarterback to, I guess, King's left, right? The quarterback open to the right, throw the ball right away. And King, when he sees the way the quarterback opens, drifts towards his left, towards the tight end, running a quick curl route, who catches the ball, and he's able to hit him right away, stop him for no gain. That's what you want to see from a hook defender in zone. You want to see him be able to respond to the quarterback's eyes, be able to understand the route concept opening up in front of him, and drive on the ball. That's one rep where King does it. Basically every other rep, he kind of looks lost in coverage, right? He'll go to his landmark in his hook zone and he'll just kind of stand there in the middle of the field. He's not able to, you know, see a route concept unfold in front of him and, you know, move towards the route that player had. There was a stick route against Illinois where he just kind of stood there in the middle of the field where the route to the opposite side was completely away from him. So there was no threat to the middle of the field from that side. You'd like to see him lean over the other direction, and he wasn't able to do that. There was a play against, you know, and there were a couple plays that ended up really poorly for him where your opponent's running a drag route over the middle of the field. It might have been mesh. In one circumstance, it was definitely mesh. In the other, I'm not sure exactly what it was, but you know, King is the middle of the field defender, and he has to be able to take over a route that's crossing the field, whether it's a tight end or a receiver, what have you. There was a play against Illinois where he let the guy go. The quarterback didn't end up throwing the ball in that direction, but it probably should have been a touchdown to that direction. It was in the red zone. And there was a play against Ohio State where it did end up a touchdown, where King's in the middle of the field. He has a player crossing his face. He's not able to anticipate that player crossing his face, and he's way late to drive towards the sideline. That player catches the pass. He's got a wide open field to go for the touchdown. I would say that was more of the signal than the noise of the single good play I thought King had in coverage, right? There's also issues with him responding to play action where in the UCLA game, I think, or maybe the West Virginia game, but he bites really hard on play action. The quarterback throws the ball to the tight end right over top of him. The tight end should catch the pass, but he gets hit by one of King's teammates and the ball drops down. King should be underneath that pass and at least batting it down, if not intercepting that to try to deter that throw. Here, the quarterback was simply easily able to get it up and over him. That's not going to play in the NFL level where you need to make those plays on a consistent basis. You know, and that kind of misdirection element, right, where he's biting on play action, to me, happens in the run game as well. I saw a number of reps where, you know, it's a sweep or something, a handoff to the to a jet sweep type player, or, you know, just any sort of misdirection element that you put in front of King, he tends to bite on the misdirection and not see where the ball carrier is going. There was a counter play where I think it was a handoff or something, but the entire offensive line is clearly blocking to the right, and King follows the ball fake to the left, right? And it ends up being, I don't even know if it was a significant gain, but his multiple steps to the left flowing, you had pulling linemen coming the other direction. And a lot of times as a linebacker, and he might not have been asked to at Penn State, right? But a lot of times as a linebacker, you're keying the pulling lineman and you have to follow the puller to your spot. He wasn't able to handle that misdirection really well, which kind of makes me question his overall feel for what's going on in front of him, right? In terms of the way he's processing his reads throughout the play, his lack of ability to move with the way the routes are developing in the passing game, his, biting on play action, his biting on misdirection plays make me think that King might be a step slow from what he sees happening in front of him to where it changes to executing his responsibility once what happens in front of him changes, right? So that's a pretty major concern for me. Obviously, as it comes to his game translating to the NFL level, like I think King has nice traits that you like to see, especially as a run defender, like him being incredibly explosive moving forward, his ability to take on blocks, his ability to fight through contact, and that sort of thing. Stack and shed blocks, I think, are all very clear positives for his game. But the questions with, like, you see a couple highlights of him working through traffic, but he's not able to maybe laterally explode in the way that you'd want him to, or laterally accelerate in the way that he wanted to. I think he's a really explosive athlete, but I think he might be a little bit of a linear athlete, right? Where, he's moving forward, he's able to make a step to the left or right, but when he's truly asked to turn at hard angle, he struggles to do it a little bit. You see the explosion coming forward. I have linear questions, and then I have processing questions, which raise a pretty major red flag for me, right? So, like, I think that you can use Kobe King as a weapon in against the run, right? Like, you can have him in the game on early downs, and I would say you could do this right now, have him in the game on early downs where he's just attacking the line of scrimmage. But to me, that limits him to kind of being a run blitzer, right? And a pass blitzer. And I didn't really see the pass rush potential where I'd be okay with putting him on the field and having him pass rush the quarterback a whole bunch of times. So, to be clear, the Vikings have Ivan Pace, who is not that great of a pass coverage defender, right? Who they use in a very aggressive way to wreak havoc against the run, to get into the backfield, to blow up opposing blockers. And that's another thing where, as blitzer, Kobe King wasn't able to blow people up. Like, Travion Henderson knocked him into the ground as a pass rusher. There was another double team against offensive linemen where he got knocked into the ground, right? So it's not just he's unable to kind of impact the passer, it's he's taking major losses in the pass rush game. Ivan Pace doesn't take those losses to me. So, like, I see a world where you have this explosive athlete against the run, and he's able to kind of, I feel like I keep repeating myself here, but come forward and make the hits on the running back, read those plays correctly in the box. And I don't necessarily see the range outside of that I think the Vikings have from Ivan Pace. So I think, unfortunately, that they might be kind of getting fooled a little bit by that, come forward, make really big and really good plays against the run. And they kind of overlooked the blemishes in their excitement about it. Now, in a very specific role, I think that can work. And Ivan Pace is a pretty limited role player. Like, he gets exploited in coverage when he gets asked to do that. But I think Kobe King is kind of a step down from where Ivan Pace is as a player, or where he even was as a player, because he doesn't have the pass rush prowess that Ivan Pace did, right? So I can get by with a player who's going to be really explosive and run defense and run stuff up with a physical, aggressive defense that the Vikings have, if that player can also get after the passer, right? If I'm constantly sending 5 or 6 guys, I can't have one of those guys consistently be a negative. And that's where I think Kobe King is as a pass rusher right now. So it really makes me question his overall fit in this defense and ability to play right away. Now, you're not necessarily expecting a 6th round pick to play right away, but the Vikings don't have a ton of depth at the linebacker position, right? They've got obviously Blake Cashman and Ivan Pace up top, both of whom suffered injuries last year and missed some time. They've got Eric Wilson, who they signed to be a backup. And then beyond that, it's Kobe King and Brian Asamoah, who they're allergic to putting on the field, right? Brian Asamoah only saw the field in true garbage time situations last year. So King might get thrust into a role, and they might be expecting him to play a role as a rotational backup in there, or at least come in, when guys get hurt. And if Ivan Pace gets hurt, I think you can make it work. The Vikings made Jamin Davis work on the defensive side of the ball, but I think ultimately you're going to have a role-limited player in King if he gets on the field, in that I'm not comfortable asking him to execute anything in coverage, and I don't really want him to blitz all that much. So I've got like a 1st and 2nd down linebacker who I guess I'm sending on run blitzes the entire time, right? Which I see as kind of not somebody who's going to have a major impact. Like I said, I really, really like the run defense. It's just everything else to me needs to develop, and I don't know what the timeline is for it to develop, especially if the Vikings are counting on him being a primary backup. Now, he can always make the team via special teams. I mean, the explosive hit ability, the burst and athleticism, I think can be valuable on special teams. I don't know how much he played, but that's kind of where I'd project Pace to be based off of what I saw from his tape at Penn State, rather than somebody who I think is going to come in and make an impact right away. Right? I think he needs to grow as a player before he can become an impact defensive player. And I wouldn't put it past him, to become a good pass coverage player and to become a much better, pass rusher with his explosion if he just has some technical things that he needs to clean up. But it's clear to me that he's not there yet. So with that, I'm going to wrap this episode up. My name is Matt Freese. You can find me at Fries Football on BlueSky. You can find my co-host Nick Olson at Nick Olson NFL on Twitter. The show is on both BlueSky and Twitter. It is at Kindred Skulls. We're available on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Also available on YouTube. And with that, Skol Vikings.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.